The envelope arrived at Dean Martin's Beverly Hills home on a Tuesday afternoon in March 1980. It looked like any other piece of fan mail, addressed simply to Mr. Dean Martin, with no return address. His assistant almost threw it in the pile with the hundreds of other letters that arrived every week. But something made her pause. The envelope was from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. It wasn't a bill. It wasn't a medical report. It was an apology. "Dear Mr. Martin," the letter began, "we are writing to sincerely apologize for an administrative error that occurred in our blood donation department. Due to a clerical mistake, a list of our regular donors was inadvertently included in a press release about our annual blood drive. Your name appeared on this list. We understand that you have donated anonymously for many years, and we deeply regret this breach of your privacy. Please accept our sincere apologies." Dean Martin read the letter twice. Then he picked up the phone and called his lawyer. But it was already too late. By the time the sun set that evening, every newspaper in Los Angeles had the story. By morning, it would be national news. The secret Dean Martin had kept for 15 years was out. The story broke on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. King of Cool's secret, Dean Martin has been donating blood anonymously for 15 years. The article detailed how Dean Martin, the man famous for holding a drink in his hand on every stage, had been quietly visiting Cedars-Sinai Medical Center once a month since 1965 to donate blood. He always came through a back entrance. He always used a fake name, Dino Crocetti, his birth name that most people had forgotten. He never told anyone. He never took credit. For 15 years, he had simply shown up, rolled up his sleeve, and given a part of himself to strangers he would never meet. The phone at Dean's house didn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Television shows wanted him to appear. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why? Why would a man worth millions, a man who could write a check to any charity in the world, spend 15 years quietly donating blood like an ordinary person? Dean refused every interview. He issued a single statement through his publicist. "It's a private matter. I have no comment." And that was all he would say. For the rest of his life, he never publicly explained why he had done it. But his family knew. His closest friends knew. And now, finally, the world can know too. The story begins not in 1965, but in 1964. It begins with a phone call that nearly destroyed Dean Martin before his son's plane crash would do it for real 23 years later. September 14, 1964. Dean Martin was on the set of Kiss Me Stupid when his assistant rushed in with a message. "Mr. Martin, there's been an accident. Your son, Dean Paul. He's been taken to the hospital." The drive to the hospital was the longest 30 minutes of Dean Martin's life. He didn't know what had happened. He didn't know if his son was alive or dead. All he knew was that his boy, his Dino Jr., 13 years old and full of life, was somewhere in an emergency room and Dean wasn't there. Dino Jr. had been riding his bicycle when a car ran a red light and hit him. The impact threw him 20 feet. He landed on the pavement, unconscious, bleeding from wounds that the paramedics couldn't stop. By the time Dean arrived at the hospital, his son was already in surgery. The doctors met Dean in the hallway with grim faces. "Mr. Martin, your son has lost a lot of blood. We're doing everything we can, but he needs transfusions. Multiple transfusions. We've put out an emergency call for donors, but we need more. We need as much as we can get." Dean grabbed the doctor's arm. "Take mine. Take all of it. Whatever he needs. We're already testing your blood type, Mr. Martin. But even if you're a match, one person isn't enough. Your son needs blood from multiple donors. We need strangers to come forward. We need people who don't even know your son to give a part of themselves to save his life." Dean sat in the waiting room for 7 hours. He watched people come and go. He watched nurses rush in and out of the surgical suite. He prayed prayers he hadn't said since he was a boy in Steubenville. And he waited for news that might never come. During those 7 hours, something happened that Dean Martin would never forget. The hospital put out a call for blood donors. And people came. Not celebrities. Not friends of the family. Not people who wanted something in return. Just ordinary people. a mailman from Pasadena who heard the news on the radio and drove straight to the hospital, a school teacher who was supposed to be grading papers but came instead because a child needed help, a retired firefighter who had donated blood every month for 30 years and happened to be at the hospital for a checkup when the call went out. One by one, they rolled up their sleeves. One by one, they gave their blood to a boy they had never met, would never meet, whose name they didn't even know at first. They didn't ask for autographs. They didn't ask to meet Dean Martin. They didn't want anything except to help a 13-year-old boy survive. At 11:47 p.m., the surgeon emerged from the operating room. Dean stood up so fast he nearly fell over. "Your son is going to be okay, Mr. Martin. It was touch and go for a while. He lost a tremendous amount of blood. But thanks to the donors who came forward tonight, we were able to stabilize him. He's going to need a long recovery, but he's going to live." Dean Martin collapsed into a chair and wept. He wept like he hadn't wept since his mother died. He wept with relief, with gratitude, with the overwhelming knowledge that his son was alive because strangers had chosen to help. Over the next few days, as Dino Jr. recovered in his hospital bed, Dean tried to find out who the donors were. He wanted to thank them personally. He wanted to give them money, gifts, anything to express his gratitude. But the hospital told him that most of the donors had given anonymously. They didn't want recognition. They didn't want rewards. They had simply done what needed to be done and gone back to their lives. This broke something open in Dean Martin. Or maybe it fixed something that had been broken for a long time. He had spent his entire adult life in a world where nothing was free. Every smile had a price. Every favor came with strings attached. Every act of kindness was really an investment, a transaction, a move in the endless chess game of Hollywood politics. He had become cynical about human nature. He had assumed that everyone wanted something, but these donors, these ordinary people who had saved his son's life, they wanted nothing. They had given freely, anonymously, expecting nothing in return. They had restored his faith in humanity at the exact moment when he needed it most. A week after Dino Jr. was released from the hospital, Dean Martin drove to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center alone. He went to the blood donation center and asked to speak with the director. "I want to become a regular donor," Dean said, "but I want to do it anonymously. I don't want anyone to know. I don't want publicity. I just want to give back what was given to my son." The director was surprised. Celebrities didn't usually donate blood. They wrote checks. They attended galas. They lent their names to fundraising campaigns. But actually sitting in a chair and giving their blood, that was uncommon. "Of course, Mr. Martin, we can arrange that. We have private rooms for donors who prefer discretion. What name would you like to use?" Dean thought for a moment. "Dino Crocetti. That's the name my parents gave me. Before I became Dean Martin. Before any of this." And so it began. Once a month, every month, for the next 15 years, Dino Crocetti would appear at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He always came on a weekday afternoon when the center was least busy. He always entered through a side door, wearing sunglasses and a hat, looking like any other man trying to avoid the California sun. He would sit in the private room, roll up his sleeve and give his blood. The nurses who worked with him learned to keep the secret. At first, they were starstruck. Dean Martin, in their donation center. But Dean quickly put them at ease with his warmth and humor. He would joke with them, ask about their families, remember their children's names and birthdays. He treated them like friends, not servants. And in return, they protected his privacy fiercely. "He was the most down-to-earth celebrity I ever met," one nurse would later recall. "He never acted like he was doing us a favor. He always acted like we were doing him a favor by letting him donate. He would thank us every single time, like we were the ones giving something instead of him." Over the years, the staff changed. Nurses retired, new ones came in. But the tradition continued. The older nurses would pull the new ones aside and explain, "There's a donor who comes in on the third Wednesday of every month. His name is Dino Crocetti. You might recognize him. Don't make a fuss. Don't tell anyone. Just treat him like any other donor. That's how he wants it." 15 years, 180 donations, roughly 90 pints of blood, enough to save dozens of lives, maybe hundreds, and Dean Martin never told a soul. His family didn't know. His closest friends didn't know. Frank Sinatra, who knew almost everything about Dean, didn't know. Sammy Davis Jr., who considered Dean a brother, didn't know. Even Dean's wives, the women who shared his bed and his home, didn't know where he went on those Wednesday afternoons. When they asked, he would just say he had an appointment. If they pressed, he would smile that easy smile and change the subject. He was Dean Martin. He was allowed his mysteries. But one person did find out by accident, long before the hospital's administrative error made it public. In 1972, Dean's daughter Gina, who was then 18 years old, needed a blood transfusion after a minor surgery. Dean rushed to the hospital to be with her. While he was in the waiting room, one of the older nurses recognized him. "Mr. Crocetti," she said, then caught herself. "I mean, Mr. Martin, I'm so sorry about your daughter. Is there anything we can do?" Dean looked at her, confused for a moment, then recognized her from the donation center. His face changed. She had almost revealed his secret. "Please," he said quietly. "My family doesn't know. I'd like to keep it that way." The nurse nodded and never said another word. But Gina, who was recovering in the next room, had heard the exchange through the thin hospital walls. Mr. Crocetti. Why would a nurse call her father by his birth name? What didn't the family know? Gina asked her father about it that night. Dean hesitated, then told her the truth. About 1964. About Dino Jr.'s accident. About the strangers who had saved her brother's life. About the debt he had been quietly repaying for 8 years. "But Dad," Gina said, "why don't you want anyone to know? It's a beautiful thing. People would admire you for it." Dean shook his head. "That's exactly why I don't want anyone to know. If I told people, it wouldn't be about giving anymore. It would be about me. It would be about Dean Martin being generous, Dean Martin being a good guy, Dean Martin getting praised for doing something nice, and then it wouldn't mean anything." He took his daughter's hand. "When those people saved your brother's life, they didn't do it for recognition. They did it because it was the right thing to do. They gave anonymously because the giving itself was enough. I want to be like them, Gina. I want to give because giving is enough. Not because it makes me look good. Not because people will thank me. Just because somewhere out there, someone I'll never meet might need what I have to give." Gina promised to keep the secret. And she did, for 8 more years, until the hospital's mistake made it impossible. When the news broke in March 1980, the public reaction was overwhelming. Letters poured into Dean's home by the thousands. People wrote to tell him how moved they were by his secret generosity. They wrote to tell him their own stories of blood transfusions, of lives saved by anonymous donors, of the invisible web of kindness that connected strangers across the country. But not everyone was supportive. Some cynics suggested it was a publicity stunt. They pointed out that the leak happened just as Dean's career was slowing down, just as he was becoming less relevant to a younger generation. They implied that Dean had arranged the whole thing to refresh his image. Dean Martin never responded to these accusations. He never defended himself. He never provided proof of his donations or tried to convince the skeptics. He simply stopped talking about it entirely. The one time a reporter cornered him and demanded an explanation, Dean said only this: "I don't owe anyone an explanation for something I did privately. If you want to believe it was fake, believe it. If you want to believe it was real, believe that. Either way, the blood was real. The people it helped were real. That's all that matters." The reporter pressed him. "But why blood donation? Why not just write checks to charity like other celebrities?" Dean was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than usual. "Because money is easy. Money is just numbers on a page. But blood is different. Blood is life. When you give blood, you're giving a part of yourself. You're saying that your body, your life force, is connected to someone else's. You're saying that we're all part of the same family, even if we never meet. He paused. In 1964, strangers gave their blood to save my son. They didn't give money. They didn't send thoughts and prayers. They gave themselves. And because of that, my boy lived. How do you repay something like that? How do you thank people who gave you the most precious gift imaginable? You can't. All you can do is pass it on. All you can do is give what was given to you. The reporter asked if he planned to continue donating. As long as I'm healthy enough to give, I'll give. Not because I'm a good person. Not because I want recognition. But because somewhere out there, right now, there's a father sitting in a hospital waiting room, praying that strangers will come forward to save his child. And if my blood can help answer that prayer, then that's what I'll do. It's the least I can do. It's the only thing I can do. Dean Martin continued donating blood until 1985, when age and health issues made it impossible. By then, he had been giving for 20 years. His final donation was on November 12, 1985. The nurses who had known him for decades gathered to thank him. Dean characteristically turned it around. "Thank you," he told them. "Thank you for letting me do this. Thank you for keeping my secret. Thank you for making me feel like I was doing something that mattered, even when the world thought I was just a singer who told jokes." One of the nurses asked if he had any regrets about the secret getting out. Dean smiled. "Only one. I wish I could have kept going. I wish I could have given more, but I'm grateful for the years I had. Every pint of blood, every needle, every Wednesday afternoon. It was worth it. All of it." 2 years later, in 1987, Dean Martin's son, Dino Jr., was killed when his F-4 Phantom jet crashed into a mountain. He was 35 years old. The boy who had been saved by strangers' blood in 1964 was gone. Dean Martin never recovered from the loss. He stopped performing. He stopped socializing. He spent his final years alone in his Beverly Hills home, watching television and waiting for the end. But according to his family, he kept 2 things on his nightstand until the day he died. One was a photograph of Dino Jr. in his pilot's uniform, smiling that same smile that had lit up Dean's world since the day he was born. The other was his blood donor card from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The card was worn and faded, bent at the corners from years of being carried in his wallet. On it was the name Dino Crocetti and the dates of his first and last donations, September 21, 1964 to November 12, 1985. 20 years, 240 donations, countless lives saved or improved, and all of it started because strangers showed up to save a 13-year-old boy, expecting nothing in return. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day 1995, the obituaries mentioned his songs, his films, his television show, his membership in the Rat Pack. But many of them also mentioned the blood donations. The secret that had been revealed 15 years earlier had become part of his legacy, a counterpoint to the image of the carefree playboy who never took anything seriously. At his funeral, one of the speakers was a man named Robert Hernandez. Nobody in the audience recognized him. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a politician. He was a 53-year-old accountant from Glendale who had been asked to speak by Dean's family. Robert stepped up to the microphone, visibly nervous. "I never met Dean Martin," he began. "Not personally. But in 1972, I was in a car accident. I lost a lot of blood. The doctors said I would have died if not for a transfusion. The blood that saved my life came from an anonymous donor at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I never knew who it was. I never got to thank them." He paused, collecting himself. "When the news came out in 1980 about Dean Martin's donations, I did some checking. The dates matched. The blood type matched. I can't prove it, but I believe that Dean Martin's blood saved my life. A man I never met, a celebrity I only knew from television, gave a part of himself so that I could live." Robert looked out at the audience. "I'm here today because of a stranger's kindness. I'm here because someone I never knew decided that my life was worth saving. Dean Martin didn't know me. He didn't know my name, my family, my story. But he gave anyway. He gave because giving was enough." He wiped his eyes. I have 3 children now. I have grandchildren. I have a life that I never would have had without that transfusion. And all of it, every birthday, every Christmas, every ordinary Tuesday, is because of Dean Martin. Not the singer, not the actor. Just a man who rolled up his sleeve and gave what he could. Robert stepped back from the microphone. The audience was silent. Many were crying. After the funeral, Robert Hernandez was approached by dozens of people. It turned out he wasn't the only one. Over the years, many people had done the same math, checked the same records, wondered if their lives had been saved by the King of Cool's quiet generosity. They would never know for certain. Blood donations are anonymous by design. But the possibility was enough. The idea that Dean Martin's blood might be flowing through their veins, keeping them alive, connecting them to a stranger they had never met. It meant something. It meant everything. The story of Dean Martin's blood donations is not a story about celebrity. It's not a story about public relations or image management or the performative generosity of the rich and famous. It's a story about a father who almost lost his son and never forgot the strangers who saved him. It's a story about a debt that could never be repaid, only passed on. It's a story about the invisible threads that connect us all, the gifts we give without knowing where they'll end up, the lives we touch without ever learning their names. Dean Martin spent 40 years making people laugh. He spent 40 years singing songs about love and happiness, and that's amore. But for 20 of those years he was also quietly, anonymously, giving pieces of himself to strangers who needed them. That's the Dean Martin the world didn't know. Not the King of Cool, not the Rat Pack playboy. Just a man who understood that the greatest gifts are the ones we never talk about. The ones we give in secret, the ones that connect us to people we'll never meet, in ways we'll never understand. Every pint of blood, every Wednesday afternoon, every needle, every donation, every silent act of love. That's not fame. That's not entertainment. That's grace. And that's Dean Martin.